And just a little bit more about the M&T Community Benefit Agreement. NCRC supported the M&T Bank Community Benefit Agreement last year because it provided specific and separate lending commitments to people of color and low and moderate income borrowers. And because M&T listened thoroughly to 115 different local organizations from different states. These are just some of the, actually if y'all could line up a little bit more, let's see. There we go. All right, let's line up. Everyone, let's give this group of representatives from financial institutions and community benefit agreements a round of applause for this community benefit agreement we put forward. We have put together over 5 this year, and we're going to have actually Barika Williams come up from Association for Neighborhood Housing and Development in New York. Barika? Barika's going to say a few words for us.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? All right, because y'all feel very far away. My name is Barika Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development, or ANHD, and we're about a 50-year-old umbrella organization that does housing, economic development, community development, and bank reinvestment advocacy in New York City, with our more than 80 neighborhood-based nonprofit community members, many of which are represented up here. And I am up here today because in M&T's agreement, M&T made specific commitments to New York City. And so what we actually got was for M&T to say, we are going to make specific and further commitments around what New York City needs. I'm going to give you a little bit of what that included. So M&T agreed to a new bank branch in the Bronx, which is huge. Shout out to the Bronx. And some of what ANHD does, you'll see data that says New York City is overbanked, and that's never true. What that means is high income and predominantly white and wealthy areas have a lot of bank branches, but places like the Bronx are underbanked, underserved, and bank deserts. So for M&T to say we're going to keep a branch here was incredible. They created a new home repair product in order to help our LMI and BIPOC homeowners and many of our immigrant homeowners. And they also did an incredible thing which really matters for us, ANHD, which is to support community organizing. And that's not something I've heard talked about as much here at NCRC. So community organizing is how we actually get this work done, right? These are the folks who are on the ground, knocking on doors throughout COVID, talking to our tenants and talking to our homeowners, doing the work of getting people activated and mobilized. I specifically want to highlight and thank M&T's local staff, Steve Flax and John Vascones, who have worked with us for years. And I think that this is really important to highlight, especially for so many of our banks in the room and so many folks in philanthropy in the room, that you can be incredibly impactful when you have local partners who really understand local organizations and local groups and are willing to have those tough conversations. So Steve and John for years have said, what's going on? What do you all need? What are you all seeing? How can we tailor our products and our grants to actually advance the racial equity work that you're trying to do as groups on the ground, not just check the box as banks that say we do racial equity, and we're incredibly appreciative of them as our partners. So I just want to thank all of the M&T team. I want to thank Mike Keegan and his team for all of the work and effort that they've done to put in place this strong commitment around low and moderate income communities and communities of color and immigrant communities for New York City and for the rest of the country. We really look forward to continuing to work with them.
All right, everybody line up. Let's say community benefits. All right, everybody, one more round of applause for everyone. who works hard for this, and I know many of you in the audience has worked for community benefits in your local area. Now, if everyone could come off the stage, and I'm going to sit here and have an opportunity to talk with Mr. Mike Keegan from M&T to talk a little bit more about the community benefits agreement and the work that we've been able to do together. See how the community organizations are already trying to have meetings with the financial institution on stage?
You're making it happen,
Yeah,
aren't you?
we're trying. All right. So we're gonna have your mic'd up. I got a mic in my hand. I think that works better with my mask. And we're here with Mike Keegan. We're gonna talk a bit about the M&T Community Benefit Agreement. So Mike, you're head of Community Banking Division. Can you tell us what that means to you?
I am. I can tell you it means that everyone's enjoying themselves right now. I'm just doing a check out there. What does it mean to be head of community banking? I mean, if you think about it for all the folks here, if you don't have community banks that understand the places in which we live and work and play, then you just can't connect to the reality of how we provide capabilities to customers, how we understand the needs of the communities. So what we want to do is, as a bank that has size, is stay small, stay relevant, and stay connected. Some of the partners who were up on the stage when we worked through this community growth plan, they were instrumental in telling us stuff that was in front of us that we didn't necessarily see, so that we can adjust accordingly.
Yep. Well, so what was your background and how did you come to M&T?
So my background was in 7th grade, just seeing if anyone's paying attention. All right, good. And actually in 7th grade, my father came to me and needed $900 to buy a really shitty car. And I gave him the money, and I wanted to make sure I got repaid, so I laminated, for those of you who remember what that is, a card, and I called it Master Keeg. And I gave him the card, and he actually paid me back, and 30 years later, he gave me that card back, and he said, I've paid all my debts, and you went into the right industry. So that's how I got into banking. But the other reason I got into banking is, if you think about what is possible if you're a banker, you can impact people's lives. You can reshape communities. You just have to be on the right team to do it, and that's why I've stayed in it.
Well, speaking of like being on the right team to do it, how did you connect with NCRC? What made you and M&T want to engage with NCRC, and even, more importantly, all of the community groups that working with NCRC means you're going to engage with?
So this story goes back to 2015 when KeyBank was working to acquire First Niagara. And Brad Dossinger, who's in the crowd tonight, he's the one who's talking the loudest. Yeah. That's why we can't hear anything. Sorry, Brad. We were going through this whole process of who are we and watching what Key was going through. And what we realized is there were gaps in the way we needed to show up in our community. And so we said back then that we need to at least think about a community growth plan in our own mind. So when this opportunity with People's United came up, we said we should actually reach out to NCRC and start a conversation about a partnership. And your organization has been terrific ever since.
That's good to hear. Let me give you an opportunity to ask some questions about NCRC or direct the conversation as you would like.
So what I want to know is, and we're going to go to Q&A with the audience. Woo! What I want to know is, why does all this work matter? Because we see community groups on the front line pouring their heart and soul into this work every day. So when you look at financial institutions, how do we develop a relationship that is interactive and sustainable and not episodic? Because what you find is there a moment where you feel the need to connect versus creating this ongoing dialogue around working together and making communities better?
I think, I think we at NCRC, I think we feel proud that we've moved forward well in maybe the first, second steps in creating strong connections with, we have over 700 membership organizations, strong relations with financial institutions like yours, and then creating these community benefit agreements where there is opportunities to engage. I think the biggest challenge is, like you said, how do we maintain those conversations? Because the issues we're trying to address with is racial economic inequality or economic equity. Aha, you can hear me better now? The racial economic equality or economic equity is not something that's going to be solved through one meeting,
No.
through two meetings, but it's going to be something that we have to engage over months, years, and really have a relationship where we're on the same page. And so I think the community benefit agreements is a starting point, but the question is, do we all have the will and organizing to help move the country past a space that we haven't moved? I just saw a paper recently called, I think, The Wealth of Two Nations, where it looked at the racial wealth divide from 1860 to 2020. And it highlighted that since 1980, racial economic inequality for many groups, for blacks in particular, has actually been expanding and not decreasing.
That's right.
So, we're doing, important regional efforts, small efforts, but what can we do to help change the direction that the country's been going for the last 40 or something years?
And I think, Diedrich, there's certain things that we can do, but part of it requires that we listen and that we hear those things that may be in front of us, but we don't necessarily see or observe. So if you think about the process that you took us through, there were 5 sessions, 2 hours each, and the majority of the executive team of M&T, the CEO included, sat through every minute of that. And what we did, thank you. Wow. What we learned is when we listen, we actually learn. And when we listen to people who tell us things that we'd like to think are different but aren't, then we can start to shape our thinking around that. I mean, if you think about everything that financial institutions do, it's with a level of kind of historical reference, but we can change that when we listen in on the conversations and we hear from groups that are on the front line, when we walk with them, and more importantly, when we view communities as places of economic vibrancy and opportunity and not underserved or underrepresented. If you shift the narrative and you just say, this is a place that so much is going on and we can thrive together, then things start to unlock. And that's the power of what this room represents.
Yeah, let's give a round of applause for that. And again, looking into the crowd, I recognize that many people in the crowd have been part of these meetings, and I think it's been one of the biggest learning experiences I've had is sitting down and listening to different regional meetings of 30 different community groups, giving their expertise, their years of expertise on how financial institutions can better invest and support their communities. And I really hope that we can develop a stronger best practices that can be shared throughout the country and that banks can share. And banks should be learning from each other, as well as community groups learning from each other.
I think that's right. So if we approach this from a perspective of constant interaction, learning from each other and figuring out how we can improve the way we show up, communities will thrive. Yeah. If we don't, then it becomes this interaction out of necessity, which isn't the best way to build sustainable communities.
And I think sustainable, is a key phrase as we're, dealing with more and more, it seems, economic turmoil, concerns of inflation that are really, hitting the average working person very hard each day, concerns about recession, concerns about retirement going down because of the stock market. So I know we need to move on to the next phase, but let me ask you if you have one final question you want to engage before we move on to the next section here.
So other than please at my table save my salad, I want to know why you chose NCRC. What's your story and why are you here?
That's interesting. So I chose NCRC, I guess really I chose the racial economic space, racial wealth divide. For the last 20 years, I've been focused on addressing the racial wealth divide. And I did that not because I had a deep love of economics, but because the 30 years before that, I worked at multicultural centers, I worked at a maximum security prison for women, I did some organizing in Harlem, I worked for Reverend Al Sharpton for some years, and I saw that economics was at the key of all of the issues I was trying to engage, whether it was working with kids whose mothers were in prison, whether it was trying to, have safer streets. The economics was essential, and this is a saying I say at a lot of presentations, that the foundation of racial inequality is racial economic inequality. And the foundation of racial economic inequality is the racial wealth divide. So NCRC, I think, really provides a unique space to engage nationwide with community organizations and financial institutions to create best practices and also hopefully advocate for best policies that can, hopefully move the country out of the morass it's been in for the last 40 years in terms of racial economic equality.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, they're glad to have you, and we are as well.
Well, I'm glad to be working with you. Let's everybody give a round of applause to
Thank you.
Mike Keegan, and we will then go to the next phase.
Thanks, my friend. Nice job.